The scene opens in an abandoned construction site under the eerie glow of the moon. A young man, Jiang Xiaoyang, stands precariously above a cage teeming with ravenous zombies. Surrounding him are a group of sinister figures, armed with deadly weapons, their eyes glinting with malice. Sweat drips down his face as he faces his captors. The leader, a woman with a cold and satisfied expression, taunts him. Is life meaningless to you now, Jiang? All of your friends are dead, aren't they? As she speaks, Jiang's mind flashes back to happier times with his friends. He blames himself for their deaths, regret and sorrow clouding his thoughts. It's all my fault. I led you to this fate. I'm sorry. Tears well up in his eyes, but his sorrow quickly turns to anger. He glares at the woman, fury building inside him. You deserve a miserable death. How can you do this to your own kind? The woman clings to a well-built man beside her, smiling with satisfaction. Look at him, angry as ever. The man says, why don't we torture him slowly? Let him feel every ounce of pain. We owe him that much, for all the supplies he brought us. The man smirks and presses a button. The platform beneath Jiang gives way, and he plummets into the cage below. The zombies, starved and feral, immediately swarm towards him. Jiang struggles, but they begin to tear into him. Jiang, if only I had another chance. I'd make them pay. I'd make sure nothing like this ever happened again. As the zombies feast, Jiang's vision fades to black. Cut 2. Jiang's living room. Jiang jolts awake, drenched in sweat. His heart races as he processes his surroundings. He hears a familiar voice. It's the same woman from before, now screaming at him. You didn't put my name on the house deed, you idiot. Jiang, disoriented, struggles to comprehend what's happening. Just moments ago, he was sure he had died. He looks around, realizing he's in a familiar room. Could it be I've been reborn before the apocalypse? He recalls the events of his past life, how Siyu Jing deceived him, stole his inheritance, and left him homeless. Then, the global catastrophe struck, turning most of the population into zombies and plunging the world into chaos. Jiang and a few friends had managed to survive and build a safe haven, only to be betrayed by Siyu Jing, who led their enemies to destroy them. Cut 2. INT Living Room Day. Siyu Jing continues her rant, demanding 400,000 yuans. 400,000 yuan, not a penny less. Jiang, now with a steely resolve, remains silent, staring at her. Did you hear me? Jiang fights the urge to act impulsively. He knows he must bide his time. The woman says that. I'll give you a week to make things right. Before she can continue, Jiang cuts her off. Fine, I got it. Now leave. He firmly pushes her towards the door, shocking her with his newfound assertiveness. When did Jiang become so bold? He used to be my lackey. Jiang closes the door behind her and turns to face the room. He glances at the clock, his mind racing. I need to prepare. The apocalypse is coming in a month. I can't let history repeat itself. Suddenly, a system alert appears before his eyes, startling him. System alert. Apocalypse system activated. Several missions appear, one of which reads, own a piece of land to earn 10 points. Jiang thinks points? What can I use them for? He explores the system and discovers a store filled with various items that can be purchased with the points. And from completing missions, in my last life, I saved every penny for that wretched woman's bride price. It left me malnourished and vulnerable. Jiang picks up his phone and sees a message. Are you full? Jiang thinks that. The zombies will be everywhere in a month. I should enjoy good food while I can. Cut 2. INT Expensive Restaurant Night. Jiang sits in an upscale restaurant, a feast before him. So this is what a Michelin 3-star meal tastes like. He takes a bite of the braised pork, his eyes lighting up with delight. This is unbelievably delicious. As he revels in the taste, his phone buzzes. He glances at the caller ID. It's one of Siyu Jing's friends. Is that manipulative woman crying to her friend again? He sighs and answers the call. How could you treat Siyu Jing like that? She just wanted you to prove your love. If you can't even give her property, how can you claim to love her? Jiang rolls his eyes at the absurdity. If you bring 1 million yuans by the end of the day, I might help you get her back. Jiang's patience snaps. Who do you think you are? Get lost. He ends the call before she can respond, leaning back on the couch, lost in thought. I'll build the strongest fortress this world has ever seen. A place where no one dares to challenge me, with access to water and a nearby forest. I'll ensure survival this time. Cut 2. INT Real Estate Office Day. Jiang walks into a bustling real estate office. A woman greets him as he enters. What brings you here today? Before Jiang can respond, a real estate manager interrupts. Help the others move those boxes to the back. We've bought too much toilet paper lying around. The woman tries to protest, but the manager silences her with a glare. Have you forgotten who taught you everything in this business? Get to work. The manager turns to John, sizing him up with disdain. A broke loser like you can't afford a toilet, let alone a house. Jiang's expression darkens. Are you looking down on people? Or are you just an evil person? The manager sneers. I look down on dogs like you.
Jiang looks at the manager and, without missing a beat, says, I'll find some fresh hot steaming ones for you later to eat on stream. The manager's smile falters, not sure if he heard correctly, but Jiang is already shifting his attention to a young lady worker nearby. With a confident stride, Jiang approaches the lady worker. She's in her late 20s, neatly dressed, and radiating professionalism. I'm not here to buy a house, Jiang announces, his voice carrying across the room. I'm here to buy land. For myself. The lady worker blinks, her professional composure wavering as she exchanges a glance with the real estate manager. Both of them can't quite believe what they're hearing. But before they can question him further, Jiang reaches into his pocket and pulls out a sleek, black pay card. The air in the room shifts as cold sweat begins to form on their foreheads. Around them, other customers start to murmur, eyes widening in shock. Buying land? One of them whispers incredulously, does he even know how much that costs? Another customer, an older man, shakes his head. I've never seen anyone buy land like that so easily. He must be incredibly wealthy. The lady worker, snapping out of her stupor, regains her composure and says, please, follow me. I'll give you the best detailed introduction we have. She leads him through the office, past the rows of cubicles and agents who can't help but stare as they pass by. The lady worker gestures for Jiang to sit on a comfortable chair in a private consultation room. She lays out several documents and maps on the table, detailing various plots of land. These are the available plots we have at the moment, she explains. Please take your time to choose the one that suits your needs. Jiang glances at the documents, but his interest is fleeting. There's no need to look through all these, he says, leaning back in his chair. I'll just tell you my requirements, and you can find the land that matches. The lady worker nods, a bit taken aback by his decisiveness. Very well, what are your requirements? Jiang's eyes narrow thoughtfully. It needs to be near mountains and water, for a reliable water source. Convenient transportation is a must, and it should have large buildings already on the land. Before she can respond, the real estate manager, who had been hovering nearby, cuts in. There's a piece of land in the East District that fits those requirements. The lady worker turns to him, surprised. The East District? But there are still unfinished factory projects there. We can't sell land like that to a client. The manager's face darkens with frustration. This broke loser's requirements are outrageous. There's no one to complete it in time. Jiang thinks for a moment, his mind already racing ahead. It's perfect, he mutters to himself. The location fits all my needs, and the unfinished factories will save me a lot of money. Plus, with some barbed wire, it'll be easy to defend. He turns to the lady worker, his decision made. I'll take that piece of land. Let's draw up the contract, and I'll pay right away. The lady worker hesitates, clearly uncomfortable. I'm sorry, but, are you sure? The land has unfinished projects, and Jiang cuts her off with a wave of his hand. I'm sure, someone's waiting to eat fresh poop later, so let's hurry up with the contract and the down payment. The real estate manager, who had been sneering in the background, suddenly goes pale, cold sweat dripping down his face. Moments later, he's holding a receipt in his trembling hands, disbelief etched on his features. It's impossible, he mutters. He really paid a $300,000 down payment. How can someone buy such expensive land for millions of dollars when the projects aren't even finished? Jiang glances at him, unfazed. I've made the down payment. Now, it's up to you to perform in front of the camera. You should at least enjoy it. The manager stares at him, dumbfounded, as Jiang turns on his heel and walks away. Around them, the other customers exchange glances, some pulling out their phones to start a live stream. Hey, he's turned on the live stream, one of them says, nudging the manager. You need to hurry up. Another customer, holding his stomach, groans. My stomach doesn't feel good, but I promise it'll be fresh for you. Jiang ignores the commotion behind him, his mind already moving to the next challenge. I've spent all the bride money on this land, he thinks, but now I need to figure out how to get more money to stockpile supplies. As Jiang exits the real estate office, deep in thought, a fat man walks past him, his heavy footsteps echoing on the pavement. The man, dressed in a suit that strains against his bulging frame, pauses and turns around, narrowing his eyes at Jiang's retreating back. Is that Jiang? He wonders, to himself. He shakes his head, dismissing the thought, and continues on his way. But when he reaches the office, he's greeted by a shocking sight. The real estate manager, surrounded by a small crowd, is being forced to eat something unspeakable. What the hell is going on here? The fat man roars, his voice filled with anger and disbelief. Meanwhile, across town, an elegant woman sits at a vanity table, meticulously painting her nails. Her phone buzzes, interrupting her concentration. She glances at the screen and her lips curl into a smile when she sees who's calling. Hello, she purrs into the phone. Do you still remember me? The voice on the other end cuts her off abruptly. Did you know that Jiang went to the real estate company to buy an expensive piece of land? The smile drops from her face, replaced by a look of shock. What? How can a broke loser like Jiang pay for something that expensive? He made a 300,000 down payment, the fat man explains, his voice laced with disbelief. He must have used the bride money. The woman's face twists with fury. How dare that bastard use my money? That money is mine. Calm down, the fat man advises. You need to figure out what's going on with him. I wouldn't want to underestimate him. The woman's eyes narrow as she considers her options. I'll expose him online, she says with venom in her voice. I'll ruin him for using my money behind my back. Back at Jiang's place, he's still lost in thought, considering how to finance his next move. Suddenly, a loud bang on the door startles him. He turns to see the evil woman standing there, her friend by her side, both of them looking furious. What are you doing here? Jiang asks, trying to keep his voice steady. The evil woman steps forward, her eyes blazing. How could you spend my money behind my back like that? Jiang is taken aback. What are you talking about? I know everything, she snaps. You used my bride money to buy that land, and since it was my money, that land is mine. Jiang's expression hardens, anger bubbling up inside him. Have you lost your mind? That land isn't yours. And by the way, I have plenty of money, he says, pulling out a stack of cash and slapping her with it. The evil woman is momentarily stunned, her mouth hanging open in shock. And don't think I don't know about your little affair with the fat man, Jiang adds, his voice low and dangerous. You've been cheating on me for a long time, haven't you? The woman's face drains of color as she stammers. How do you know about that? Her friend, sensing the tension, steps in. It's just a misunderstanding, really. You two should. There's no misunderstanding, Jiang interrupts coldly. A cheating woman like you isn't my girlfriend anymore. Go back to your fat man. With that, he slams the door in their faces, his patience completely spent. Outside, the evil woman stands frozen, her mind racing. How did he know about the affair? We were always so discreet when we booked those rooms. Her thoughts swirl in confusion and anger. Her friend, sensing her distress, tries to comfort her. Maybe it's best if we just go for now. We can figure out a plan to handle Jiang later. The evil woman's face twists with frustration, but she nods slowly. You're right. That's all we can do at the moment. But as they turn to leave, her friend hesitates. Wait, the friend says, a sly smile creeping onto her face. Since you've messed things up with Jiang, maybe this is my chance to get closer to him. After all, we're supposed to be good sisters, right? The evil woman barely notices the implication, too lost in her own thoughts. Back at the construction site where Jiang purchased the land, he stands amid the partially completed structures, surveying the area. A middle-aged man in a hard hat, clearly the foreman, approaches him, looking concerned. Mr. Jiang, the foreman begins, how long do you expect these renovations to take? The foreman swallows nervously but presses on. But sir, finishing this project in a month's time is nearly impossible. The cost alone will be enormous. Jiang's eyes narrow. How much? The foreman hesitates, then gives a figure. To rush the job and increase the work intensity, it'll cost at least 20 million. Jiang raises an eyebrow. Is 20 million enough? He asks, his tone icy. The foreman nods, trying to maintain his composure. Yes, but we'll need a 5 million deposit to start immediately. Jiang nods and replies, you'll have the money within a week. Start building now. The foreman tries to interject, but Jiang cuts him off. If I don't pay, the land will be yours. So don't worry about the payment, just get to work. The foreman nods reluctantly and heads back to his crew to relay the orders. As Jiang turns to leave the site, he hears a familiar voice calling out his name. He turns around to see the friend of the evil woman running toward him, her expression eager. She clings to Jiang's arm, smiling up at him. What are you doing here? She asks, her tone sweet. As the witch's sly friend cozied up to Jiang, a practiced mask of innocence on her face, she sidled closer, her voice laced with feigned curiosity as she asked what he was doing there. Jiang's eyes narrowed as he glanced at her, barely containing the simmering rage beneath his calm exterior. Memories of betrayal flickered through his mind like lightning in a storm. This was the very woman who had once conspired with the witch to strip him of his family's legacy in his previous life. A rush of anger tightened his chest, but he forced himself to remain composed. The weight of his vow to exact double the pain he had endured hung heavy in the air, his expression darkening with each passing second. The woman, oblivious to the tempest brewing within him, continued her charade, her voice sickly sweet as she pretended to be nothing more than a concerned friend. She tilted her head, a smile dancing on her lips as she asked if this was the land he had recently purchased. Her eyes glittered with false admiration as she complimented the scenery, her tone as if nothing had ever transpired between them. Leaning in, she subtly pressed her chest against his arm, her intentions clear despite her innocent facade. John's response was swift and merciless. He abruptly shoved her aside, his voice cold and unyielding as he told her that his plans were none of her business. The suddenness of his rejection left her reeling. She stumbled back, shock written across her features as she tried to process what had just happened. This was not the Jiang she remembered. Gone was the boy who would have blushed just from holding her hand, replaced by a man who pushed her away without a second thought. Confusion and frustration warred within her as she attempted to regain control, batting her lashes and lowering her voice into a seductive purr. But Jiang was unmoved, his eyes hard as stone as he turned his back on her. Ignoring her entirely, he walked purposefully towards the construction workers who were busy at the site, barking orders to widen the gates. His voice carried the authority of someone who was used to being in charge, and the workers scrambled to comply, sensing the shift in his demeanor. Behind him, the witch's friend watched in disbelief, her carefully laid plans crumbling before her eyes. She had seen Jiang as an easy target, especially after his breakup with Cui Juing. With him emotionally vulnerable, she had hoped to manipulate him into giving her access to this valuable land, but now, that possibility seemed to be slipping away. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides as she desperately tried to think of another way to turn the situation in her favor. But Jiang didn't spare her another glance as he walked away, his mind already focused on the challenges ahead. Later, back at his home, Jiang sat on his worn leather couch, a mountain of documents spread out before him. He leaned forward, poring over the papers that detailed the plans for his newly acquired land. The numbers swam before his eyes, and he muttered to himself, frustration creeping into his voice. Mortgaging his house had only netted him 3 million, far short of what he needed for the first phase of construction. The financial strain was immense, and the knowledge that he was essentially broke weighed heavily on his shoulders. But Jiang was nothing if not resourceful. With the apocalypse looming on the horizon, he knew conventional rules no longer applied. Selling the house multiple times wouldn't be an issue, given the chaos that was about to descend upon the world, and that's exactly what he planned to do. A sudden, insistent pounding on the door jolted him from his thoughts, followed by a familiar, grating voice demanding entry. Sighing deeply, Jiang recognized the voice of his meddlesome neighbor, Grandpa Li. The old man owned the first 2 floors of Jiang's building and had been a constant thorn in his side, always looking for an opportunity to buy Jiang's 3rd-floor apartment. But Jiang had steadfastly refused, as that floor had been intended as his marital home, a dream now shattered. As he trudged to the door, Jiang couldn't help but curse under his breath, recalling the old man's relentless antics, vandalizing the building, dumping trash in the stairwell, and even leaving ominous funeral wreaths at his door as a twisted form of intimidation. Jiang yanked open the door, his face a mask of irritation. Grandpa Li stood there, his gnarled finger pointed accusingly as he launched into a tirade, accusing Jiang of being out clubbing the previous night. The accusation was absurd, and Jiang snapped back, his patience wearing thin. He denied the old man's claims with a sharp retort, telling him to stop spreading baseless rumors and to mind his own business. But as the words left his mouth, an idea sparked in Jiang's mind, an idea that could solve his financial woes. "Old man," Jiang began, his tone suddenly calm and calculating, "how about I sell you the house?" The question caught Grandpa Li off guard. His eyes widened in surprise, and he hesitated, the gears in his mind turning as he tried to gauge whether Jiang was serious. Jiang, looking down at the old man with disdain, confirmed that he was indeed serious, but with one condition: Jiang would stay in the house for 6 more months, and Li would have to pay 5 million up front. This sum would allow Jiang to clear the loan on his new property and move forward with his plans. Li's eyes narrowed as he attempted to negotiate, his miserly nature getting the better of him. But Jiang, already tired of the conversation, began closing the door, telling Li to forget it if he wasn't interested. Panicked, the old man quickly wedged his foot in the door, nervously agreeing to the terms. His eagerness to finally get his hands on the 3rd floor outweighed his reservations, and he insisted they sign a contract to make the deal official. Jiang, though irritated by the man's persistence, agreed, knowing that with the apocalypse imminent, he had just conned the old fool out of his money. As he shut the door behind him, Jiang let out a long, exasperated sigh, muttering a curse under his breath directed at Grandpa Li. He walked over to his desk, where his phone sat charging, and began calculating the total sum he had now. With the 5 million from Li and the 3 million he had from the mortgage, Jiang had 8 million in total. It was a decent amount, but he knew it wouldn't last long with the ambitious plans he had in mind. Just then, the system interface appeared in front of him, a transparent screen that only he could see. It indicated that he had completed the first task of acquiring land, and a notification flashed, allowing him to claim his reward. Jiang's lips curled into a satisfied smile as he accepted the reward, feeling a sense of accomplishment wash over him. But there was no time to rest, his journey was just beginning. The next day, Jiang headed into the city, his mind set on tackling the next task, gathering a year's worth of supplies. The city was bustling as usual, the people blissfully unaware of the impending doom. Jiang moved with purpose through the crowded streets, eventually arriving at a large shopping mall. He grabbed a cart and began filling it with everything he could think of: non-perishable food, bottled water, medical supplies, tools, and other essentials. Cart after cart piled high as he systematically cleared entire shelves. Shoppers around him whispered in disbelief, their curious gazes following him as he continued his spree. Some laughed, dismissing him as a fool who had fallen for doomsday rumors. Others shook their heads in pity, thinking he had lost his mind. But Jiang paid no attention to their comments. He knew what was coming, and he was determined to be prepared. After hours of shopping, Jiang finally wheeled his overburdened carts to the checkout. The cashier's eyes widened in shock at the sheer volume of items, but she began scanning them nonetheless. Jiang stood by, unfazed, as the total climbed higher and higher. When the cashier handed him the payment terminal, Jiang swiped his card with a confident smile, completing the transaction without a hitch. The onlookers were left gaping, their earlier scorn turning to astonishment. As Jiang turned to leave, a loud, authoritative voice called out from behind him. He turned to see a man flanked by several store guards approaching him. The man was scruffy, with a perpetual sneer on his face, and he wore a manager's badge that identified him as Yang Tao. Jiang immediately recognized him. Yang had been a classmate of his in high school, and a notorious lackey of the school bully, Zhang Xingjia. Yang had always been the type to pick on the weak and suck up to the strong, and it seemed that not much had changed. Yang's sneer widened as he demanded to know who was causing trouble in his store. He approached Jiang, puffing out his chest as if trying to assert his authority. Jiang couldn't help but roll his eyes at the display. It was pathetic, really, to see Yang trying to play the tough guy when he had been nothing more than a cowardly sidekick in school. Well, if it isn't Yang Tao, Jiang said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Still bullying the weak while groveling before the powerful, I see. Yang bristled at the insult, but before he could respond, Jiang cut him off. He calmly informed Yang that he was there to buy the items, and if this was how Warenfa treated its customers, it was no wonder the store was struggling. Yang's face flushed with anger, but he hesitated. His bravado faltered as he looked at the sheer amount of goods Jiang had purchased. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone who had once been at the bottom of the social ladder. But something about Jiang's confidence, the way he seemed utterly unbothered by the situation, gave Yang pause. You think you can just waltz in here and buy out half the store? Yang finally spat, his voice shaky with indignation. "You'll pay for this right now, or you'll face the consequences." Unfazed, Jiang simply smirked, his eyes cold. "You seem to be under the impression that I'm bluffing. I assure you, I'm not." He pointed at the stack of receipts. "The transaction's already done. Now, if you're finished wasting my time, I'd suggest you move aside." Yang was taken aback. He glanced over at the cashier, who nodded nervously, confirming that Jiang had indeed paid for everything. His mind raced, trying to salvage the situation, but before he could come up with a response, Jiang's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "And another thing," Jiang added, his tone dropping to a menacing low. "You owe me an apology for your rudeness. If you don't, I'll return everything I just bought, and I'm sure your superiors would love to hear about how you treated a customer who spent millions in your store." Yang's eyes widened in shock. The other customers, who had been quietly observing the exchange, began to murmur among themselves. Some of them even took out their phones, ready to record the scene. Jiang's threat wasn't just empty words, he was fully prepared to follow through, and the last thing Yang needed was to become infamous online for mistreating a high-paying customer. One of the onlookers, emboldened by Jiang's stance, called out, "Yeah, apologize. Or we'll make sure everyone knows what kind of manager you are." The pressure was too much. Yang swallowed his pride, his face burning with humiliation as he reluctantly bowed his head. I apologize for my behavior," he muttered through gritted teeth. Jiang didn't let him off the hook that easily. "Louder, so everyone can hear it." Yang's hands trembled with anger, but he complied. "I apologize for my behavior," he said, louder this time, his voice echoing through the store. Satisfied, Jiang gave a curt nod. "Good. Now, don't let it happen again." He patted Yang condescendingly on the head, like one might a disobedient dog. "And remember, it doesn't pay to be reckless." As Yang seethed in silent fury, Jiang casually began to walk away, but then paused, as if remembering something. "By the way, what's your name again?" he asked, his tone now disarmingly pleasant. "Yang." "Yang Tao," the manager stammered, still thrown off balance. Jiang nodded, feigning interest. "Yang Tao, that's right. You're still hanging around with that old bully Xingzhe, aren't you? How nostalgic. I suppose you never did outgrow that, did you?" The subtle dig made Yang flinch, but Jiang continued before he could respond. "Speaking of Xingzhe, I'm planning a big venture, something you might find interesting. This store's inventory won't be enough for what I have in mind. Do you happen to know a good wholesaler?" Yang, sensing a potential opportunity to redeem himself, immediately latched onto the idea. "Actually, I do," he said quickly. "Zhang Xingzhe, he's in the wholesale business now. I could arrange a meeting for you, if you'd like." Jiang pretended to consider it for a moment, then nodded. "Fine. Give him a call. Tell him I'm interested in a large-scale purchase. And let him know it's Jiang, you know, from high school." Yang's relief was palpable as he eagerly made the call, boasting to Xingzhe about having found a lucrative client. Jiang, meanwhile, couldn't help but feel a twinge of disappointment at how little Yang had changed. Even after all these years, he was still Xingzhe's lackey, blindly following orders and groveling for approval. Later that afternoon, Jiang and Yang arrived at a large, somewhat rundown warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The area was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic from the nearby highway. As they waited, a flashy, expensive car suddenly roared into the lot, its tires screeching as it came to an abrupt halt, nearly clipping Yang in the process. Yang jumped back, startled, but before he could react, the car door swung open, and Zhang Xingzhe stepped out. Dressed in a designer suit and sporting an arrogant smirk, he looked every bit the part of a man who had grown too comfortable with his own power. A cigarette dangled from his lips, and he blew a cloud of smoke in Jiang's direction as if to assert his dominance. For a moment, Xingzhe didn't seem to recognize Jiang, barely sparing him a glance as he surveyed the warehouse. But then, something clicked. His smirk faded, replaced by a look of surprise as he finally made the connection. Well, he drawled, his voice dripping with condescension. "If it isn't the little punk from high school, what brings you to my neck of the woods, John? Looking to relive old memories?" The large, dimly lit warehouse is filled with crates and barrels. Xingzhe, a rough-looking man with a permanent scowl, is standing with Yang, his subordinate. They are waiting near the entrance as the heavy metal door creaks open. Jiang walks in, dressed casually in a hoodie. His demeanor is calm, almost indifferent, as he approaches the pair. Xingja, tugging at Jiang's hoodie drawstring, "What's this? Fake designer crap? You think you can fool people with this junk?" Xingja sneers, clearly enjoying himself as Yang chuckles nervously behind him. "Xingja, I can't stand people like you. Always pretending to be rich when you're just a nobody." Jiang glances down at his hoodie, unfazed by Xingja's taunts. Jiang, calmly, "I wouldn't know. I bought it at some random store. Couldn't care less about the brand." Xingja's smirk falters slightly, annoyed by Jiang's lack of reaction. He suddenly grabs Yang's head, yanking him closer. "Xingja, and you, Yang, bringing this useless guy as a client? What were you thinking?" Yang winces, trying to pull away, but Xingja holds him in place. "Xingja, you're wasting my time with this trash. I should kick you both out right now." He shoves Yang back, kicking him hard in the butt. Yang stumbles forward, trying to explain himself. Yang, desperately, "But Xingja, this client. He's the real deal. I swear. Just give him a chance." Xingja crosses his arms, clearly unconvinced. Xingja, snorting, "Do I look stupid to you? I've been in this business longer than you've been alive. I know who's rich and who's not. And this guy? He's nothing." Jiang, quietly, "Seems like your years in this business haven't improved your brain. Smoking those rubbish cigarettes must have clogged it up, too." Xingja's eyes flash with anger. He strides forward, grabbing Jiang by the collar, yanking him close so that their faces are inches apart. "Xingja," through gritted teeth, "what did you just say to me?" Jiang doesn't flinch, his expression remaining calm as he repeats himself. "Jiang, I said, you look down on people because you're too arrogant to see the truth." Xingja's grip tightens, his face flushing with rage. But before he can respond, Yang steps in, trying to defuse the situation. Yang, nervously, "Xingja, it's just people calling you illiterate. You know how much that bothers you." Xingja glares at Yang, then kicks him aside with a swift motion. Xingja, snarling, "Shut up, Yang. You talk too much for your own good." Turning back to Jiang, Xingja's expression is one of menace. "Xingja, you're not leaving here standing unless you buy a truckload of goods." Jiang, still unperturbed, pulls out his phone. Jiang, coldly, "Stop tugging on my collar and show me the account. I'll pay." Xingja hesitates, then pulls out his phone, showing Jiang the account details. Within seconds, Jiang wires $1 million directly to Xingja. Xingja's eyes widen in shock as the notification pops up on his screen. He stares at it, utterly baffled. "Jiang, there's more where that came from. I'm here to buy $5 million worth of goods. Get the truck loaded, and I'll pay the balance when the goods are ready." Xingja, still stunned, struggles to regain his composure. "Xingja, what kind of goods are you buying?" Jiang, firmly, "Rice, salt, anything edible or drinkable. I want it all." Xingja's mind races as a sly smile creeps onto his face. "Xingja, follow me. I've got exactly what you need." He leads Jiang deeper into the warehouse, his thoughts already scheming. They arrive at a section filled with barrels and crates. "Xingja, I can give you a 10% discount if you take the whole batch." Jiang walks over to one of the crates, inspecting it closely. He picks up a brown bag, feeling its weight in his hands. His eyes narrow as he examines it carefully. Jiang, nearly expired. All of it, except for the outer layer. Xingja's smile falters again as he realizes Jiang has seen through his ploy. Jiang, calmly, "You're a shrewd man, Xingja. Trying to pawn off nearly expired goods on me." Xingja chuckles nervously, caught between his pride and desperation. "Xingja, how about a 50% discount, then? You won't find a better deal." Jiang places the bag back down, shaking his head. "Jiang, no need. I'm only using the $5 million to buy the best quality goods. But I have plans for these expired ones." Xingja's curiosity gets the better of him. "Xingja, what plans? Why would you want so many nearly expired goods?" Jiang smirks, his eyes cold as he taps Xingja's shoulder. "Jiang, let's just say even expired goods can be worth a fortune in the right circumstances." Xingja swallows hard, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. His voice shakes as he asks, "Xingja, what do you mean by that?" Jiang's expression turns serious. "Jiang, stop asking questions. Just deliver the goods. I'll send you the address later." At that moment, Jiang's phone rings. He answers, turning slightly away from Xingja. "Jiang, yes? The house? Sure, I'm still selling it." He ends the call quickly and turns back to Xingja. Jiang, I've got other matters to attend to. Take care of the food. Without another word, Jiang strides out of the warehouse, leaving Xingja and Yang behind. Yang, worried, did he scam us? What's his deal? Xingja, still reeling from the strange encounter, mutters to himself. Xingja, how is this guy doing so well? His family's nothing special. Jiang arrives back home, greeted by Grandpa Li, an elderly man with a kind but weary face. Li holds out a bag full of cash, his hands trembling slightly. Grandpa Li, here's the deposit. Jiang, please. I need that house. We can sign the contract right away. Jiang eyes the bag of money, then looks at Li with a puzzled expression. Jiang, you didn't even inspect the house before making the deposit. Why the rush, old man? Li's face falls, his shoulders slumping as he speaks in a low voice. Grandpa Li, my granddaughter, she needs to transfer schools. We need the house for residency. I've looked everywhere, and yours is the only one for sale. Please, don't back out of the deal. Jiang studies the old man's sincere, pleading expression and sighs. Jiang, you're too honest for your own good. Aren't you worried I might raise the price after hearing that? Grandpa Li's face pales, his hand clutching his chest as he stammers. Grandpa Li, but buying the house will cost us everything. Please, Jiang, we don't have any more to give. Jiang waves off the concern, his tone softening slightly. Jiang, relax. I'm not backing out. Let's get this contract signed. They quickly finalize the paperwork, and Grandpa Li's relief is palpable as he bows deeply before leaving. Jiang, to himself, that old man's honesty will be his downfall when the apocalypse comes. He suddenly stops Grandpa Li at the door. Jiang, wait. Give me the address of where you're living now. Grandpa Li, slightly confused but eager to comply, writes down his address before leaving. Jiang watches him go, a thoughtful expression on his face. The next day, Jiang arrives at the construction site, greeted by the construction manager. The manager is a gruff man, his eyes sharp as he quickly gets to business. Construction manager, we're between 70 and 80% complete. But we need the next batch of funds. Jiang nods, looking around as the manager shows him the progress. They stop under a reinforced door, the manager proudly explaining its safety features. These walls and doors are reinforced to withstand almost anything. Your place will be the safest in the area once we're done. Jiang nods approvingly, his eyes scanning the site. He then shifts his attention to the warehouse. Jiang, and the warehouse? Is it ready? Construction manager, yes, we've cleaned it up, and it's ready for use. You can start moving your supplies in any time. A satisfied smile spreads across Jiang's face as he pulls out his phone. Jiang, perfect. Let's get started. Jiang dials Xingja's number, and a moment later, Xingja picks up. His voice is cautious, still wary of Jiang after their last encounter. Xingja, yeah? What is it now? Jiang, cheerfully, bring the goods. The warehouse is ready. Moments later, trucks start arriving at the construction site, filled with crates and barrels. Workers, eager to get the job done, begin unloading the supplies. Despite the late hour, they work quickly and efficiently under Jiang's watchful eye. Jiang oversees the process, ensuring that everything is stored correctly. The workers, though tired, are motivated by the generous pay Jiang is offering. They comment among themselves as they work. Worker 1, this place looks like a shelter. The boss really values his life, huh? Worker 2, can't blame him. If you've got the money, might as well use it to survive. As the last of the supplies are stored away, the workers start to leave. Jiang stands alone in front of the massive stacks of goods, a look of satisfaction on his face. Jiang, to himself, 10 years worth of supplies, done. He glances at the system interface that only he can see, a small notification appearing in the corner of his vision. Task completed, acquired 10 years worth of supplies. Reward, 20 points. Jiang opens the system's store, browsing through the available items. His eyes light up as he notices a new item, a box labeled Awakening Ability. Jiang, excitedly, finally, a chance to get stronger before the apocalypse hits. Without hesitation, he purchases the box. It glows faintly in his hand before disappearing, and a new notification pops up. Congratulations! You have awakened the ability, Mind's Eye. Jiang's smile widens as he reads the ability's description. The Mind's Eye allows him to detect hostile or harmful intentions in others, a crucial skill for the chaotic days ahead. Jiang, grinning, this is perfect. I'll be able to see through anyone's true intentions. The system then presents Jiang with his next mission: arm yourself. Jiang's grin turns mischievous as he reads it. Jiang, chuckling, just what I had in mind. The black market buzzed with the murmur of clandestine deals, hidden beneath the shroud of night. Shadowy figures exchanged glances, their hushed negotiations cutting through the air, adding to the chaotic rhythm of their transactions. A man with a French beard, dressed sharply in a suit, leaned over a table, scrutinizing a high-ice jade bracelet with a discerning eye. His voice dripped with disdain as he spoke. A high-ice jade bracelet for 2,000? It's obviously a fake. I'll take it for 300, and you'll still walk away with a decent profit. Deal or not? His anger simmered as he continued. If I'm lying. The seller, visibly rattled, quickly capitulated. All right. No need to shout. It's yours. Nearby, Jiang observed the exchange with a smirk. He mused quietly. Li Shuxiong, that bastard, came to the black market to buy a fake jade bracelet? Shaking his head in disbelief, he muttered, Cui Jing, that fool, is dumb enough to fall for such trash. Seated cross-legged, Jiang was engrossed in inspecting an array of swords and knives. Holding a knife in his hand, he inquired, Boss, do you have anything sturdier? Cui Jing, visibly irritated, snapped back, This is a knife sharpener. If you want something tougher, buy it and sharpen it yourself. Otherwise, grab a baton. Jiang's brow knitted in frustration. None of these are tough enough. I need something more durable. Cui Jing's patience wore thin as he retorted, What do you mean? Are you trying to stir up trouble? Before Jiang could respond, Cui Jing's phone chimed with a new message. Ding dong, 200,000 yuan credited in AC No. 2032-96. He stared at the notification in disbelief. Jiang, holding a QR code in his phone, calmly reassured him, No need to get worked up. I'm serious about buying. Cui Jing, regaining his composure, called out, Xiao Xiang, come mind the stall. Xiao Xiang, absorbed in his mobile, looked up in confusion. Cui Jing, gesturing towards the interior, said, Talking out here isn't convenient. Follow me inside. As they moved indoors, Cui Jing began to showcase his wares. He opened a gun case containing a homemade firearm, explaining, Boss, we have homemade guns. Great for shooting chickens, 2,000 yuan, with cheap ammo, just gunpowder and steel balls. What do you think? Jiang's response was blunt. No. Cui Jing was momentarily taken aback. He then presented another item, replica revolvers, almost as good as actual handguns, 5,000 yuan. They fire 9mm bullets. Bullets from me are 5 yuan each. Deal? Jiang, growing impatient, replied, Barely acceptable, but I prepaid you 200,000 yuan. Offering me this junk doesn't seem right, does it? Cui Jing was incredulous. What prepayment? He demanded, his tone a mix of surprise and irritation. Jiang, unfazed, responded calmly, 10% payment. He continued, I'm looking to buy 2 million worth of weapons. Cui Jing's eyes widened as he processed the information. Who are you, big brother? For such a large order, you come to me, he asked, clearly taken aback. Jiang's expression remained serious as he replied, I didn't handle these trivial matters before, my subordinates did. Recently, some changes happened. Don't pry too much, just tell me if you can handle it or not. Cui Jing's demeanor shifted quickly. Wait a moment, he said, hurriedly closing the door and checking the windows. You've come to the right person. He leaned in close to Jiang and whispered, I can handle this. Write a list, and I'll give you an address. At midnight the day after tomorrow, drive there to complete the transaction. Bring cash, Cui Jing added firmly. As they stepped outside, Cui Jing gave Jiang a parting glance and cautioned, Watch your step, big brother. Just then, a voice interrupted. Oh, isn't this Xiao Yong? Jiang glanced over, his expression unreadable. Li Shuxiong approached with a smirk. Didn't expect to see you in the black market. No wonder you've been spending so lavishly lately, he taunted. Ignoring Cui Jing, seems like your family has some heirlooms. He continued, What's this? Watched too many marketing accounts lately? Trying to lie flat, sell everything, and live comfortably? Jiang's mind raced. He thought, right, let's try the newly acquired ability. With a smirk, Jiang responded, Indeed, lying flat. So this is, so you tricked Cui Jing into bed with these fakes and second-hand goods? He added with a mocking tone, Makes sense. She's just my second-hand goods, only worth this much. Li Shuxiong, furious and unable to control his temper, shouted, "Idiot! What did you say?" Meanwhile, Cui Jing, noticing the escalating tension, turned to Zhang and asked, "Big brother, you know him?" Zhang's voice was cold as he replied, "Humph. Know him? More like an enemy." Understanding the situation, Cui Jing nodded and said, "Got it. Big brother, go do your thing. I'll teach him a lesson." Zhang's eyes narrowed as he issued a warning, "Don't kill him. I have other plans for his life." Panicking, Li Shuxiong tried to regain control, shouting, "What are you doing? I'm warning you, I." But before he could finish, Cui Jing, now seething with anger, stepped in between them. His mere presence was enough to silence Li Shuxiong, who suddenly found himself fearful. "You, big brother, let's talk," he stammered, his bravado fading. Cui Jing didn't waste any time. With swift, decisive action, he took Li Shuxiong down. The once proud man was now lying on his belly, helpless, with Cui Jing's foot pressing firmly against his face and dress coat. Li Shuxiong's mind raced with anger and humiliation. "Zhang Xiaoyong, you idiots! Just wait," he seethed internally, plotting his revenge. The scene then shifted to 2 days later. A storage area buzzed with activity, as a truck was being loaded with arms. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with anticipation. Suddenly, a notification flashed across Zhang's vision. "Task, battle ready, completed. System points, +10. Current points, 20. Bonus rewards. Reward, physical enhancement potion, +2. Zhang's eyes lit up with interest. "Oh? An extra physical enhancement potion as a bonus," he mused, holding the injection in his hand. "Even a +2. 1, equivalent to double the one in the store." Without hesitation, he injected himself with the potion. The moment the liquid coursed through his veins, pain shot through his body. He gritted his teeth, enduring the sensation as his muscles began to bulge and his strength surged. "Arg," he grunted, feeling the intense power taking hold. The average physical score for an adult male is 5. Adding these 2 points increases strength by 40%. Since that's the case, he calculated, his mind already racing ahead. Physical +2. He thought to himself, might as well maximize this advantage. With a determined shout, "Ha!" he clenched his fists, feeling the raw power within him. 8 points in physical. 60% more strength than an average person. Time to find a target to test, he declared, eager to put his newfound strength to the test. Zhang, feeling the surge of strength from the enhancement potion, grabbed an iron rod lying nearby. With a powerful ha, he bent the rod effortlessly with his bare hands. Laughing in satisfaction, Zhang said, "Huh? As expected. With my current strength, even barehanded, I'm not an easy match." He flexed his newfound power, feeling invincible. "Even against zombies in the early apocalypse, I won't be afraid." Looking around at the weapons stacked nearby, he decided, these weapons shouldn't take up much space. Better to store them in the spatial ring for safety. Zhang carefully stowed the weapons, preparing for the challenges ahead. As he finished, he reflected on what lay ahead. The day after tomorrow was the first day of the apocalypse. What else needs to be done, he muttered, planning his next moves. Just then, an old man appeared, speaking with a sense of urgency. "Sai, to be honest, my granddaughter needs to transfer schools, and we urgently need this house for residency," the old man explained, his voice heavy with worry. "I've been circling this area for days, and only your house is for sale. Mr. Zhang, please don't back out." Zhang stood silently, his eyes closed in deep thought. His mind flashed with memories of the life and death struggles and treachery of the apocalypse he had witnessed. Opening his eyes, he sighed inwardly. Even after experiencing the harsh realities of the apocalypse, it's still hard to completely ignore the plight of the unfortunate, he thought. After a moment of contemplation, he made a decision. "All right," Zhang finally said, his voice firm yet compassionate. "I'll send some essential supplies for the apocalypse. Whether you can survive long-term will depend on you." He paused, reflecting on the old man's request. "Consider it a repayment for providing the funds for my apocalypse plan." As the car finally rolled to a stop, Zhang stepped out, stretching his stiff muscles after the long, winding drive. He muttered to himself, "Thank heavens for GPS. Without it, finding a place like this would be a nightmare." The remote, desolate location sent a shiver down his spine, the mere thought of navigating here without technology making him uneasy. He approached the building, its exterior worn and weathered, a stark contrast to the bustling city he had left behind. This old man must be struggling, Zhang mused, taking in the shabby surroundings. The building was clearly past its prime, and the fact that the old man rented the top floor of all places seemed even more unusual. As the elevator groaned to life, slowly carrying him upward, Zhang's mind raced with anticipation. Reaching the top floor, Zhang paused, hand hovering just above the door. Wait, he thought, his instincts kicking in, I should get the supplies out now. It'll save me from having to explain later. With a sense of urgency, he rummaged through his bag, pulling out several items. A brief flash of something cold and metallic glinted in his hand before he stuffed it into his pocket. Coming! Just a moment. A voice, weary yet warm, called from inside. The door creaked open, revealing an elderly man whose eyes widened in a mix of surprise and relief. If you're here about the rent, I swear I'll have it by next week. He began, his words trailing off as he finally recognized the figure standing before him. Wait a minute, Mr. Jiang? Recognition dawned on the old man's face, brightening his weary expression. Mr. Jiang. What brings you here? I'll explain later, Jiang responded quickly, his eyes darting nervously down the corridor. But first, help me move these inside, and be quick about it before anyone sees us. The old man chuckled, amused by Jiang's apparent urgency. You young folks and your energy, always in such a hurry, he remarked as he helped Jiang carry the supplies into the cramped apartment. Once inside, Jiang scanned the small room with a practiced eye. It's not much, but the door's sturdy enough, he murmured, almost as if to reassure himself. Then, turning sharply to the old man, his voice hardened. Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. The old man straightened, sensing the gravity in Jiang's tone. These supplies, Jiang began, should last you 6 months if used wisely. Starting tomorrow, this world. His voice faltered, eyes narrowing as something in the room caught his attention. The old man, sensing the tension in Jiang's sudden silence, tried to lighten the mood. You don't need to worry, Mr. Jiang. You can keep these supplies here. We're moving in a month anyway, remember? A name suddenly echoed in Jiang's mind, sending a cold shock through his system. Shan Shan. The name reverberated, bringing with it a wave of dread that quickened his pulse. Almost instinctively, he blurted out, Old man, is your granddaughter's name Meng Shanshan? The old man blinked, taken aback. Yes, but how do you know that? I don't recall ever mentioning her to you. Jiang's heart pounded as unease tightened its grip on him. Where is she now? Where's your granddaughter? She's at home, attending school, the old man replied cautiously, confused by Jiang's sudden intensity. Once the house transfer is done, we plan to move her to a new school. The paperwork's almost complete. As the old man spoke, Jiang's thoughts spiraled into chaos. Memories of a young girl's voice, filled with despair and guilt, echoed in his mind. It's all my fault. I doomed my grandpa. Jiang's knuckles whitened as he gripped the supplies, a foreboding sense of dread sinking in. Something was horribly wrong, and deep down, he knew time was slipping through his fingers like sand in an hourglass. Jiang's mind was a storm of memories, a torrent from a life that had ended in tragedy. He remembered it all too well, the previous life where everything had spiraled out of control. In that life, he thought, his heart heavy with regret, Shanshan told me how her grandpa risked everything for her. He bravely broke into her high school, already swarming with danger. He saved her, but at the cost of his own life. The haunting image of the old man sacrificing himself to save his granddaughter replayed in Jiang's mind, a tragic echo he couldn't silence. His gaze fell on a photo of Shanshan and the old man, their smiles a painful reminder of what was lost. His resolve hardened, his grip on the photo tightening. This time, Jiang whispered fiercely to himself, I will not let regret be your legacy. I will change this fate. Turning sharply to the old man, he declared, Old man, you won't be moving into my house anymore. The old man's face went pale, fear and worry flickering in his eyes. Mr. Jiang. You're not backing out, are you? You can't. You promised. His voice trembled, the uncertainty overwhelming him. Let me finish. Jiang interrupted, his voice laced with urgency and a sternness that left no room for argument. Starting tomorrow, this world will descend into chaos, a living hell. Neither my house nor your granddaughter's school registration will matter anymore. His words hung in the air, heavy with an ominous certainty that sent a chill through the room. The old man's confusion deepened, his voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Jiang, what are you saying? I don't understand any of this." Jiang clenched his fists, frustration gnawing at him. He's too old to grasp the full gravity of what's coming, he thought, realizing he needed a different approach to make the old man understand. He softened his tone, hoping to bridge the gap. "Old man, do you know what famine is?" The old man nodded slowly, his voice shaky. I know." Jiang leaned in, his eyes intense. "You can imagine the terror, the desperation that comes with famine, right? How life turns tragic and terrifying in an instant." I can imagine," the old man replied, his voice quivering with the weight of old memories. "But how could there be a famine in peaceful times? Even if there was, it wouldn't be like that." As the old man spoke, a sudden realization began to dawn on him, his eyes widening in shock. "Huh," he gasped, his voice trembling. All the things disappeared." "Mr. Jiang, what kind of magic is this?" Jiang's ring glowed faintly, revealing a secret he had kept hidden. "I have superpowers," he confessed, his voice steady and filled with a quiet authority. "And I can also foresee the future. If you want to survive, if you want Shanshan to survive, you must do everything I say from now on." The old man stared at Jiang, his mind reeling from the impossible truth he was now forced to accept. But the resolve in Jiang's eyes left no room for doubt. Realizing he had no choice, the old man nodded, trusting in Jiang's warning. "Where is Shanshan's school?" Jiang asked urgently. Without a moment to lose, they both rushed to the car, the engine roaring to life as they sped through the darkening streets, racing against an unseen clock. The city blurred past them as they neared the school, the weight of impending doom pressing down on them. As they arrived, Jiang turned to the old man, his voice taut with urgency. "Which class and dorm is Shanshan in? Do you know?" "I know," the old man replied, though his voice was tinged with worry. The fear in his eyes was unmistakable. "Good. Let's hurry." Jiang barked, his sense of urgency reaching a fever pitch. Inside the school, chaos reigned. In one of the dorm rooms, a vicious fight had erupted among the girls. Shanshan was at the center of it, trying to defend herself against a torrent of jealousy and rage. A girl slapped her, her voice seething with venom. "You bitch! What does Zhang Xiaocheng see in you?" Shanshan tried to keep her composure, her voice shaking as she replied, "I told you, I don't want to be with him. He's the one who keeps insisting." But before she could finish, another girl kicked her hard, cutting her off. "Did I ask for your excuses?" she hissed, her eyes blazing with hatred. As the chaos unfolded, Jiang and the old man sprinted through the school halls, each step echoing with the urgency of their mission. The clock was ticking, and Jiang knew that what happened next would change everything. He couldn't afford to fail, not this time. The first girl, her face twisted with malice, yanked on Shanshan's hair, her voice dripping with scorn. "What do you mean? Are you saying Zhang Xiaocheng is clinging to you, and you're rejecting him?" Shanshan let out a pained cry, her voice barely audible. Just then, Jiang and the old man burst onto the scene. The old man's face was a mask of shock and fury. "Hey! What are you doing?" he roared, his voice cutting through the chaos. One of the girls turned her smirk toward Shanshan's grandfather, eyes narrowing with disdain. "Ha? Isn't that your useless grandpa?" Shanshan's eyes widened in fear and desperation. "Grandpa! What are you doing here?" The old man, brimming with righteous anger, shouted, "Let go of Shanshan right now." But before anyone could move, 3 boys appeared, each brandishing a baseball bat. One of them sneered with a cruel grin, "Step back, old man. This is a matter for the young ones. What's an old fart like you doing here?" Refusing to be cowed, the old man took a step forward and shoved one of the boys back. "You little brats! Did your parents not teach you any manners? Bullying a classmate like this?" The boy's eyes flashed with hostility. One of them, enraged, shouted, "Old bastard! Move aside!" He swung his bat menacingly, aiming to strike the old man. But before the bat could connect, Jiang moved like a shadow, blocking the attack with a swift, decisive motion. "Learning to be thugs at such a young age, huh?" Jiang's voice was icy, each word dripping with menace. Another boy, taken aback by Jiang's sudden intervention, sneered, "Huh? Who's this poor old fool?" The third boy, noticing Zhang's protective stance, smirked at Shanshan. I didn't know you had an older brother. Without a moment's hesitation, Zhang launched into action. He kicked one of the boys with precision, sending him sprawling across the pavement. The other two boys, alarmed by the sudden shift in power, hesitated, their bravado fading. Did he train or something? One of the boys muttered, fear creeping into his voice. Let's take him together, the third boy shouted, trying to muster some courage. The two remaining boys charged at Zhang in unison, but Zhang's enhanced physical abilities made him an unstoppable force. His movements were swift and precise, a blur of calculated strikes and defenses. With my enhanced abilities, even my reactions are lightning fast, he thought to himself as he grabbed one of the boys and slammed him hard into the ground. The remaining boy, desperate and cornered, pulled out a knife and lunged at Zhang with wild, erratic swings. Zhang, with a practiced ease, disarmed him and quickly subdued him with a decisive strike. The girl who had earlier hit Shanshan stood frozen, her bravado evaporated. Her eyes were wide with terror as she stammered, "What do you want to do?" Zhang, his gaze cold and unyielding, scanned the group. The scene was now one of stark contrast, his composed demeanor amidst the shattered remnants of their aggression. I'm here to protect Shanshan, Zhang said, his voice steady and unwavering. And I won't hesitate to ensure her safety. Now, get out of here before things get worse. The bullies, their confidence shattered, scrambled away in fear, leaving behind a scene of chaos and confusion. As Zhang turned to the old man and Shanshan, the weight of the moment settled heavily upon them. They had narrowly escaped a disaster, but the threat of the coming chaos loomed large. Zhang knew they had only just begun their race against time. Zhang burst into the scene, his presence like a storm sweeping away all obstacles. His eyes, blazing with a fierce determination, fell upon the chaos before him. A girl was assaulting Shanshan with relentless kicks and blows. Without a moment's hesitation, Zhang intervened, delivering a powerful slap to the girl's face that abruptly ceased her violence. The girl stumbled backward, stunned and disoriented, her mouth hanging open in shock as she tried to comprehend the sudden shift in power. Zhang's glare cut through the confusion like a blade. His voice, sharp and commanding, resonated with authority as he confronted her. He seized her by the hair, yanking her close, the intensity of his anger palpable. The girl's pleas for release were filled with desperation and fear as she struggled against Zhang's grip. Her screams echoed with a mix of rage and terror. Zhang, his expression unyielding, drew a knife with a deliberate, calculated motion. He held it to her throat, the cold steel pressing against her skin. The girl's eyes widened, her face paling with dread as she gasped at the sight of the blade. In a swift, almost methodical movement, Zhang began to cut through the girl's hair. The blade sliced through her locks, sending large chunks of hair cascading to the ground like fallen leaves in autumn. The girl's protests grew more frantic, her voice trembling as she stared at the growing pile of her severed hair. Her anger and disbelief were evident as she cursed Zhang, vowing to retaliate. Zhang remained unperturbed, his voice icy and detached. He explained that long hair could be a liability, his words carrying an unsettling calm. The girl's fury only intensified as she demanded an explanation, but before the confrontation could escalate further, Shanshan, who had been observing silently, spoke up. Her voice held a hint of grim foresight as she mentioned that short hair might prove advantageous in the days to come. Turning to Shanshan, who stood beside Grandpa Li, Zhang made a decisive command. He urged Shanshan to leave with him immediately. Her confusion was evident as she questioned their departure. Without answering, they all climbed into the car. As they drove away, Shanshan's curiosity was piqued, her questions about their abrupt change and plans flowing rapidly. Grandpa Li, sitting in the front seat, let out a weary sigh. He explained that a severe famine was imminent, rendering schooling a secondary concern compared to survival. Shanshan's skepticism flared as she chided her grandfather for falling victim to what she perceived as scam calls. Her playful yet exasperated tone suggested a long history of similar conversations. As they bickered, Zhang's mind was preoccupied with a solemn promise. Shanshan. In this life, I will keep you safe, he vowed silently. Breaking his silence, he turned to address both Shanshan and Grandpa Li. He revealed that the information about the famine was indeed accurate and came from him. Shanshan's eyes filled with suspicion as she questioned Zhang's identity. Calmly, Zhang introduced himself as Zhang Xiaoyong, offering to be addressed as Brother Xiaoyong. The revelation took Shanshan by surprise, but her gratitude for Zhang's intervention was clear. Zhang's dismissive gesture towards the girl's attackers suggested their days were numbered, an ominous statement that only deepened Shanshan's fears. She questioned the validity of the famine, her apprehension growing as she tried to reconcile the gravity of Zhang's words with her grandfather's warnings. Zhang's gaze was fixed on the passing scenery outside the car window, his face a mask of impenetrable resolve. He finally broke the silence, his voice carrying a weight of cold certainty. He revealed that the famine story had been a fabrication, a tool to help Grandpa Li grasp the severity of their situation. Relief washed over Shanshan as she absorbed the truth. The notion of a famine in these seemingly tranquil times seemed improbable. But the gravity of Zhang's next words cast a heavy shadow over her relief. The true threat, he revealed, was the apocalypse. The word apocalypse hung in the air like a death knell, and Shanshan's initial relief was quickly replaced by a deepening sense of dread. The car, racing into the unknown, seemed to amplify the ominous tension that had settled among them. As the road blurred past, Zhang's eyes narrowed, scanning the sky as if searching for signs of an impending storm. He muttered something under his breath, a cryptic remark that left Shanshan uneasy. Turning to her, he instructed her to check her phone for short videos and news updates. He was certain that signs of the apocalypse would soon become apparent. Shanshan hesitated, her fingers trembling as she fumbled with her phone. The skepticism in her voice was palpable as she murmured doubts about the reality of the situation. But her skepticism quickly faded when a video on her feed drew her attention. The video began with a hauntingly poetic narration, a contrast to the chaos that followed. Shanshan's eyes widened in horror as the screen showed a person, clearly afflicted with rabies, attacking others in a frenzied state. The clip captured a chilling scene, a man ranting about a strange, acrid smog, and another individual shrieking in fear as they were bitten by a seemingly rabid assailant. The chaotic images were punctuated by the attacker's unsettling confession, "I couldn't resist. I feel terrible, take me to the hospital." Zhang's voice cut through the disarray, confirming Shanshan's worst fears. The apocalypse was no mere fabrication, it was unfolding before their eyes. Shanshan's face drained of color as she turned to Zhang, her voice barely above a whisper as she asked if the apocalypse was real. Zhang's grim nod was a confirmation that sent shivers down her spine. Tomorrow, he revealed, would mark the beginning of a catastrophic event. Toxic smog would engulf several provinces, including Province B. As Shanshan absorbed the horrifying news, she struggled to comprehend the magnitude of the impending disaster. Zhang explained that this smog would gradually transform a significant portion of the population into zombies. And those who died would also join the ranks of the undead, their souls lost to the horrors of the apocalypse. Zhang's gaze locked with Shanshan's, his expression intense. He inquired if she understood what zombies were, as if gauging her readiness for the terrifying reality they were about to face. The atmosphere in the car was thick with tension, the weight of their grim fate pressing down on them as they continued their journey into the unknown. Shanshan nodded, her expression a mixture of disbelief and resignation. The enormity of Zhang's claims was almost too surreal to accept, but she could not ignore the urgency in his tone. Zhang sighed heavily, the weariness evident in his eyes as he reassured her. The apocalypse, he explained, would soon become all too real, whether it began tomorrow or within the week. As the car slowed to a crawl, the traffic ahead was a tangle of frustration. The once speeding vehicle was now ensnared in a snarl of congestion. Zhang cursed under his breath, his irritation clear. "Damn, we're stuck in traffic." Shanshan's frustration mirrored his as she glanced around. The emergency lane, too, was blocked, leaving them with no apparent escape. Grandpa Li, seated in the front, turned anxiously towards Zhang. He voiced his concern about the zombies catching up to them if they remained immobilized. Zhang's reassuring smile didn't fully mask the tension in his demeanor. His eyes scanned the road ahead, betraying a deeper unease. The thought of a possible outbreak, even a small one, gnawed at him, pushing him to press harder on the gas pedal despite the still encumbered traffic. Without warning, a car veered abruptly into their lane. Shanshan gasped, clutching her seat as Zhang slammed on the brakes. The car swerved violently, and Zhang's grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles were white. His anger was palpable as he glared at the offending vehicle, cursing the reckless driver. Determined to confront the situation, Zhang sped up, maneuvering to get past the car. The driver of the offending vehicle responded with a smirk and a barrage of obscenities, their confrontation escalating into a dangerous game of road rage. Grandpa Lee, with concern etched on his face, urged John to avoid further conflict, noting the other driver's apparent wealth and power. John's response was a cold, dismissive chuckle. His calm demeanor masked a simmering edge of menace as he promised to deal decisively with anyone who dared to challenge him. The traffic finally began to clear, offering a brief respite. John allowed himself a moment of relief, only for Shan Shan to shatter it with a warning. The same car from before reappeared, aggressively maneuvering alongside them. John's anger flared anew as the vehicle swerved ahead, overtaking them. Grandpa Lee's nervous advice to avoid further trouble was drowned out by John's steely determination. The impending apocalypse, he reasoned, left no room for tolerance of such scum. Suddenly, the reckless car ahead crashed into another vehicle, coming to a jarring halt. The driver, livid and vengeful, stormed out and began hurling insults at Jiang. With a phone in hand, the man furiously dialed the traffic police, demanding surveillance footage and a license plate number. The driver's threat was a sharp, audible challenge as he pointed aggressively at John's car. The tension between the two vehicles reached a boiling point. John's expression remained inscrutable, his eyes reflecting a chilling calmness as he weighed his next move amidst the growing chaos. The atmosphere in the car was charged, the looming apocalypse now mingling with the immediate danger of road rage. John's car rolled to a stop, and he stepped out alongside Shan Shan and Grandpa Lee. The cool, quiet evening air wrapped around them, casting an eerie calm as they took in their surroundings. John's eyes were drawn to the towering structure ahead. The sheer size of it overwhelmed him, and he muttered to himself in awe, realizing the gravity of their situation. However, his tone quickly shifted back to its usual seriousness as he reminded the others to rest, knowing that the challenges ahead would be relentless. That night, they rested, though the weight of the unknown lingered in the air. Morning came swiftly, and Jiang was the first to wake, drawn to the window to survey their environment. The early light of dawn barely illuminated the landscape, giving the world a soft, quiet glow. Before long, Shan Shan appeared beside him, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. She stretched, savoring the moment of peace, relieved to not have to rush into the routine of morning classes. Jiang acknowledged her presence with a nod, a rare lightness in his voice as he beckoned her to follow. Together, they observed what he proudly referred to as their fortress. He pointed out the thick, reinforced concrete walls with evident satisfaction. Outside, Grandpa Lee joined them, silently taking in the scene as Jiang continued explaining the layout. The building wasn't just any ordinary structure, it was a hotel fortified like a stronghold. John's attention turned to the main gate, and he explained with confidence that the remote-controlled barrier, made of solid steel, was nearly impenetrable. No one, neither human nor zombie, could breach it without significant force. As they walked the grounds, Shan Shan, still uneasy in adjusting to their new reality, voiced a question that had been nagging at her. Her words were tinged with a mix of concern and curiosity as she asked what they would do if survivors came seeking refuge. Would they be left to die? John's gaze hardened at the question, his voice lowering as he led them up to the balcony that overlooked the area. The view from up there was vast and foreboding, matching the seriousness of the situation. He explained the harsh reality of the apocalypse, warning them that human nature was unpredictable, and in times like these, people's darkest instincts would surface. Compassion, he cautioned, could be fatal. Grandpa Lee stood nearby, silently absorbing the weight of John's words, a flicker of fear crossing his face. He offered no response, only nodding in agreement as the truth settled in. From the balcony, they peered down at the empty streets below. John's eyes scanned the horizon as he laid out a grim but necessary plan. If survivors arrived while he was away, the buffer zone would offer temporary shelter, but under no circumstances were they to let anyone inside the fortress until he returned. Both Shan Shan and Grandpa Lee understood the gravity of his command, responding with quiet but resolute agreement. The reality of their situation had fully set in, and there was no turning back. John stood tall before Shan Shan and Grandpa Lee, his expression serious as he prepared to brief them. He declared firmly that their next stop would be the food storage, where he would explain which areas could be rationed out. Together, they walked toward what appeared to be an old supply room. As they approached, something shifted in John's demeanor. A faint blue glow flickered in his eye, and he muttered, almost in surprise, about the sudden activation of his power, Mind's Eye. The surge of energy caught him off guard, and he quietly noted that this was the first time it had appeared, a sign of trust, perhaps. Pointing his ring toward a nearby box, he watched as it responded, glowing softly. He resumed his explanation with a steely tone, emphasizing the critical importance of keeping weapons under their control, especially in the apocalypse. Weapons are the most important thing, Zhang warned, making it clear they must never allow their armory to fall into the wrong hands. Grandpa Li nodded vigorously, fully agreeing with Zhang's assessment. Absolutely, that's a must, he echoed, understanding the gravity of the situation. Suddenly, a system notification flashed in front of Zhang's vision, activating a new task, *reunite with Meng Shanshan. Series task former comrades activated, *. The task directive was clear, find and rescue your former comrade. Zhang Qi. A reward of 20 points was promised for completing the mission. Zhang blinked, processing the information as a faint smile played on his lips. He had been wondering how to track down his old comrades, and now, the answer had presented itself. His focus shifted back to Shanshan and Grandpa Li, his voice sharp with urgency as he reiterated his instructions. Everything he had just told them was critical, and violating any of it was out of the question. His commanding tone ensured that both understood the stakes. Shanshan, sensing his growing urgency, looked at him curiously and asked where he was headed. Zhang, without hesitation, replied that they were recruiting, needing to build up their team for what lay ahead. Before long, they were in the car, driving through the desolate streets toward their next mission. The silhouette of a KTV building loomed in the distance. Inside, the atmosphere was starkly different, a hall filled with people, some clutching microphones, others lost in conversation. Amidst the noise, a man with his arm around another offered comfort, encouraging his friend to let out his emotions if he needed to. Nearby, two boys laughed heartily, one of them playfully responding to a question about their destination with a hiccup and a slurred answer, explaining they were headed to the restroom. Laughter and teasing filled the room, with light-hearted banter exchanged about kidney problems, but outside the building, the mood was far more tense. The crowded street outside was bustling with survivors, each person on edge. Chaos erupted when a man accidentally collided with a young girl, causing her to stumble and cry out in pain. Flustered, the man immediately apologized, but before the situation could be resolved, another man, who had been walking with the girl, stepped in aggressively, kicking the man who had bumped into her. His voice was low and menacing as he demanded whether the man even bothered to watch where he was going. Zhang Qi, the man who had been kicked, grunted in pain as he staggered back. A nearby boy rushed to his side, concern etched on his face as he checked if Zhang was okay. But before Zhang could respond, his anger flared, and he loudly confronted his attacker, questioning the unnecessary violence. The man, already seething, snarled back, clearly insulted. It was the first time someone had dared to talk back to him, and he wasn't about to let it slide. Clenching his fists, he promised to teach Zhang a lesson. As the confrontation escalated, another figure watched from a distance, irritation written across his face. He muttered under his breath about his bad luck, just recovering from a stomach flu, now catching a cold, and, on top of that, having to deal with yet another senseless fight. Tired of the constant chaos, he sighed, wondering aloud why no one ever seemed able to take a break from the violence. Just as the tension reached its breaking point, two individuals rushed between the combatants, arms outstretched in a desperate attempt to calm the situation. Their voices were pleading, urging everyone to stand down and restore some semblance of peace. The street hung in a thick silence as everyone waited to see whether their intervention would prevent the brewing conflict from boiling over. The atmosphere crackled with tension as the enraged man's voice roared through the room, filled with a dangerous arrogance. He fumed with rage, seething as he grabbed the person who had dared to intervene and stop the fight. The intervener, caught in the crossfire, turned desperately to Zhang Qi and his friend, urging them to flee quickly. The urgency in his voice was palpable, hinting at the gravity of their situation. The furious man's anger reached a boiling point as he demanded that the server summon his boss immediately, threatening to shut down the karaoke bar in his wrath. His voice, laced with menace, cut through the room, refusing to be pacified by the server's stammering attempts at calm. Seizing the moment of distraction, Zhang Qi and his companion bolted, rushing into another room with adrenaline-fueled haste. Bursting through the door, they found themselves amid a crowd of bewildered onlookers who turned to stare at their sudden and frantic entry. One of them, puzzled by their hasty retreat, raised an eyebrow and inquired about their rush. Panting and still recovering from their flight, the boy explained the situation. A drunken thug had tried to assault them after a chance encounter in the restroom. Zhang Qi, still visibly shaken, added that they had narrowly escaped a severe beating thanks to the quick-witted intervention of the server. The room's mood shifted as a guy, who had been sitting calmly, scoffed at their retreat. He questioned why they hadn't fought back, his disdain clear as he grabbed his phone, determined to rally their mechanical engineering classmates for a counterattack. His eagerness to escalate the situation was evident as he prepared to call for reinforcements. Zhang Qi, sensing the danger of further confrontation, raised a hand in an attempt to defuse the situation. His voice was firm yet laced with concern, urging his peers to avoid trouble and focus on the imminent graduation that loomed less than a year away. As the tension in the room mounted, the background music continued to play, and people danced, but the unease was palpable. Then, with a sudden jolt, the door slammed open. The thug from earlier stormed in, dragging a woman with bruises on her face. His followers trailed behind him, their menacing presence causing the room to fall into a stunned silence. All eyes were drawn to the intruders as the thug's sinister grin widened. He pointed directly at Zhang Qi and his friend, his voice dripping with malice as he identified them. The woman accompanying him, her voice icy and commanding, ordered the others to seize Zhang Qi and his companion. Instinctively, Zhang Qi and his friend huddled defensively, their hands moving to protect their necks as they braced for what was to come. The guy who had earlier boasted about calling for backup stood up, facing the thug with a defiant glare, challenging him to a confrontation. Without a moment's hesitation, the thug snatched a bottle from a nearby table and hurled it at the defiant figure. The bottle shattered against Chen Chang's head, sending a spray of glass and blood cascading down. Chen Chang staggered, the impact of the bottle leaving him bleeding and disoriented. Meanwhile, outside the KTV building, Zhang's car came to a stop. He stepped out, his eyes surveying the building with a smirk that betrayed a mix of amusement and disbelief. As he prepared to enter, he muttered to himself, remarking on the irony of college students still singing in the face of the apocalypse. Unbeknownst to him, the chaos inside was about to escalate further, setting the stage for a confrontation fraught with danger. Chen Chang's head began to bleed from the sudden impact, and he groaned in pain, clutching his wound. Zhang Qi, seeing his friend in distress, reacted with worry, calling out to him as blood trickled down Chen Chang's face. Meanwhile, the person who had struck Chen Chong with a bottle turned to his girlfriend, seeking approval. With a smug expression, he asked if she felt any better now. But she remained unimpressed, scoffing at his actions. She coldly pointed out that her anger wasn't directed at Chen Chong, who hadn't bumped into her, but at someone else entirely. In response, the man angrily shifted the blame toward Zhang Qi, barking accusations at him. Zhang Qi stood silent, feeling the tension rise, unable to find the words to defend himself. Despite the blood running down his face, Chen Chong gathered his strength and reached for a nearby ashtray, his hand trembling. Just as he prepared to retaliate, the man who had been speaking to the girl noticed his movement and quickly grabbed him, tightening his grip while shouting insults at him for daring to fight back. The aggressor's companion, momentarily stunned by Chen Chang's courage, muttered under his breath about not expecting such guts from the younger man. Without hesitation, he grabbed another bottle and smashed it over Chen Chang's head. The second blow was too much, and Chen Chong collapsed to the floor, unable to stand. Zhang Qi, shocked by what had just happened, felt his anger flare. Without thinking, he charged toward the man, shouting in rage. His opponent sneered, taunting him for his continued defiance and calling for his companions to beat Zhang Qi to death. Despite his attempts to fight back, Zhang Qi's punches were uncoordinated, and the group easily overpowered him. He stumbled backward, groaning in pain. On the sidelines, Lao San hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. Noticing this, Zhang Qi shouted at him, his frustration evident, calling Lao San a coward and urging him to join the fight. Finally, Lao San rushed forward, grabbing one of the boys from behind and locking him in a chokehold. The boy gasped for air, struggling as his face turned red, cursing and begging for help. The girl screamed at the sudden turn of events, her voice piercing through the chaos. The brawl continued to escalate, with no end in sight as tensions boiled over. One of the onlookers, visibly shaken by the escalating chaos, shouted nervously, claiming he had subdued two of the boys and urged his companions to help with the fight. Hearing this, the companion of the boy being choked rushed over, bewildered by the struggle. He exclaimed in disbelief, wondering aloud how their attacker could be so strong as he attempted to break the hold. In response, the boy doing the choking abruptly released his current target and swiftly grabbed the bewildered companion instead. His frustration boiled over as he yelled about being bitten, comparing his new opponent to a ferocious dog. The boy's eyes widened in panic as he struggled against the relentless grip, exclaiming that his attacker seemed insane, his strength far beyond what they expected. Amidst the chaos, a powerful new figure appeared, exuding an intimidating presence. With surprising ease, this newcomer grabbed the boy doing the choking from behind, lifting him effortlessly. In one swift motion, he slammed the boy against a nearby mirror, shattering it into pieces. The boy's body crumpled to the ground, stunned and motionless from the force of the attack. The boy who had initially been choked stared in disbelief, his mind racing as he processed the overwhelming strength of the newcomer, Jiang. He couldn't comprehend how this kid had managed to pin someone so powerful with just one hand. The leader of the group, who had been orchestrating the violence, was equally stunned, repeating the same thought in shock. He couldn't believe that Jiang, someone known for his immense strength, had been subdued so easily. Standing tall amidst the shards of broken glass, Jiang cast a calm yet concerned gaze toward Zhang Qi. He asked if Jiang had been bitten, his tone steady, showing confidence despite the mayhem surrounding him. In the dim, flickering light of the warehouse, Zhang Qi's voice quivered, barely audible, as he tried to stammer a response. His eyes darted nervously, caught off guard by Jiang's piercing gaze. Jiang's expression was stern, exuding an unspoken authority as he commanded Zhang Qi to follow him. Without a moment's hesitation, Jiang began to move with a purposeful stride. However, the tension in the air escalated when one of the attackers, a burly figure with a gruff demeanor, shouted an ominous warning. His outstretched hand aimed to seize Zhang Qi, but he was interrupted by the agonized sounds of his own companion. The man staggered, clutching his head and coughing violently. He barely managed to gasp, "Boss. I cough. My head spinning." Confusion crossed the boss's face, mingling with a hint of irritation as he questioned the state of his subordinate's health. "What's wrong? Is your cold getting worse?" His tone was laced with frustration, clearly impatient with the delay. The ailing man managed to reply, his voice weak, "This afternoon, it was just a runny nose." Zhang's eyes narrowed, his focus shifting with a sense of urgency. He approached the man with a penetrating look, scrutinizing the bite mark on his shoulder. "Was this bite from him?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. The man, barely grasping the gravity of the situation, groaned in discomfort. "Ugh, yeah, so what?" he responded, dismissing the implication. Zhang's mind raced through the implications. He quickly assessed the situation, realizing the bite might indicate a dangerous infection. If he was already infected, and now you've been bitten so close to your head. Zhang's thoughts were relentless. You're likely to mutate soon. In a swift and decisive move, Zhang seized the man who had inflicted the bite, the one responsible for the choker, and hurled him into a nearby room. He slammed the door shut and locked it securely, a grim smirk playing on his lips as he reflected, "Good thing zombies haven't figured out how to open doors yet." Turning his attention back to Zhang Qi, Zhang's voice was sharp and commanding. "Zhang Qi, tell me which ones need to be taken out." Zhang Qi, still reeling from the chaos, could barely comprehend the situation. "What, do we know each other?" The boss, anger flaring in his eyes, scoffed dismissively. "Kid, you're getting a bit too cocky." He braced himself to launch an attack on Zhang, but before he could move, Zhang reacted with lightning speed. With a brutal efficiency, he grabbed the boss's face and forced him down with a swift, powerful motion. As another attacker charged at them with a desperate cry, Zhang threw the boss down with a resounding thud that reverberated through the warehouse. The boss's companion, his fury mounting, screamed threats at Zhang as he lunged forward. However, Zhang's reflexes were quicker, and with a single, formidable punch, he sent the man crashing to the ground. The fallen attacker's companion stared in disbelief at his incapacitated comrade. "Hey, what happened to you? Seriously? One punch and you're seizing up," he exclaimed, astonished by the sudden turn of events. With the situation now firmly under his control, Zhang's gaze swept over the remaining attackers. His fists were clenched, and his presence radiated a formidable aura. "Anyone else not convinced? Want to test my fists? Come on, bring it." His challenge hung in the air, daring anyone to step forward. The remaining attackers hesitated, their confidence wavering in the face of Zhang's unyielding resolve. The tension in the dimly lit room was palpable as Zhang's voice sliced through the air, commanding with an unshakable authority. He ordered Zhang Qi to take Chen Chong, the wounded friend, and wait outside. Zhang Qi, though startled by the sudden shift, didn't hesitate. His pulse quickened as he nodded, quickly responding, "Oh, okay." Without further delay, he and another companion carefully hoisted Chen Chong up, the injured man's arm draped across their shoulders. They moved swiftly yet cautiously, the weight of the atmosphere thickening around them as they exited, nerves strung tight with anticipation. The moment they were about to step into the hallway, one of the gangsters muttered, unease flickering across his face. "We're leaving too." His words carried an undercurrent of fear, as if he could sense the storm that was brewing. But before they could make a move, Zhang's voice, sharp and unwavering, cut through the room again. "Hold it," he snapped, stepping forward with a gaze that could slice through steel. His eyes, dark with fury, locked onto the group, pinning them in place. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded, venom lacing every syllable. His glare was unrelenting, cold, and calculating. "You don't even know your own name after drinking, do you? You almost got my brother killed tonight." His voice lowered, the anger now tightly coiled, ready to strike. The gangster, already on edge, bristled at Zhang's words, snapping back, "What nonsense are you spouting? Get out of my way." But before the man could take another step, Zhang was on him like lightning, his movement swift and brutal. In an instant, the gangster was hurled against the wall, the impact reverberating through the room. The room fell into a stunned silence as the gangster's body crumpled to the floor. Fury surged in the man's eyes as he struggled to rise, his voice shaking with rage. "Damn it! You're dead, you little bastard," he bellowed, but Zhang, unmoved by the threat, didn't so much as flinch. With a swift motion, Zhang locked the door, trapping the enraged gangster inside. The man pounded on the door, his shouts turning into a cacophony of rage. "Bastard! Little punk! Open the door! I'll skin you alive!" Outside the room, chaos erupted. The gangsters left behind were shouting in confusion, their voices blending into the madness. "What the hell are you doing?" someone yelled, panic creeping into their tone. Zhang had little time to process the chaos as another attacker lunged at him. His movements were quick but feral as he wrestled with the man. "Damn it! Are you a dog too?" he spat through clenched teeth, his muscles straining. With a final surge of strength, Zhang sent the attacker crashing to the floor. The sound of bodies hitting the ground echoed like gunshots, the heavy thud filling the tense silence that followed. The air crackled with fear and uncertainty. Someone, eyes wide with confusion, shouted, "Why did the bathroom door open?" The voice trembled as they pointed towards the barely opened door, a sense of dread creeping into the room as groans of pain filled the space. Just then, a figure appeared at Zhang's side, wide-eyed with concern. "Sir, what's going on? Do you need help?" they asked, the words tumbling out in a rush. Zhang's reply came swift and cold. "Lock this door completely. No one is allowed to open it." His voice was edged with urgency. "Then call the police and the hospital. Tell them there's a patient with rabid flu in this room." Rabid flu, the person stammered, eyes flickering with confusion at the odd request. But the hard look in Zhang's eyes left no room for argument. "Do it!" Zhang snapped, his patience wearing thin. Yes, they quickly fumbled with the lock, struggling for a tense moment before securing it. Under their breath, a frustrated murmur escaped them, "Ah! Ugh!" But at last, the door was locked, sealing the chaos inside. As the dust settled, Zhang turned to his friends. "Let's go," he said, his tone devoid of the rage that had colored the previous moments. But the tension hadn't fully dissipated. It lingered, thick and oppressive, hanging over them like a storm cloud. As they moved away, a low, trembling whisper came from behind. "No. No way, that sound, it's way too much." The words were barely audible, but they carried a sense of dread, a warning that the storm was far from over. As the commotion spread, a nearby assistant, alarmed by the rising chaos, couldn't contain their confusion. "What's going on? Why is it so chaotic?" they asked, their voice trembling with unease. Another person, equally baffled, replied, "Some guest mentioned there's a rabid flu patient inside." "Rabid flu," the assistant repeated, now genuinely alarmed. "Is it real? Could it really be the rabid flu?" The person shrugged, uncertain. "Do you know anything about it?" The assistant glanced around nervously, their mind racing. "I've heard about it. Let's check the live surveillance." Together, they rushed to the surveillance room. When they arrived, the sight on the screen sent a cold shiver down their spines. The once chaotic but manageable situation had spiraled into a nightmare. 3 people had become infected, one had already killed someone, while another was viciously tearing into a young girl. The room was awash in panic. "Call the police. Report this, now," one of the staff members yelled, their voice barely masking the rising terror that gripped everyone. Fear spread like wildfire. Meanwhile, Zhang's instincts kicked in. He grabbed Zhang Qi and the others, urgency flashing in his eyes. "We need to leave, now. This place isn't safe. Without wasting a second, they raced for the exit, hearts pounding as they piled into the car, fleeing the building as fast as possible. As the car sped through the darkened streets, the weight of what they had just witnessed bore down on them. Jiang Qi, still shaking, turned to Jiang, his voice quivering. "Big brother, thank you for saving us, but who are you, really?" Jiang's eyes stayed fixed on the road, his tone calm but firm. "My name is Jiang Xiaoyong. I was hired to protect you." The details about who hired me aren't important. One of Jiang Qi's companions, still struggling to make sense of everything, asked nervously, "Is the rabid flu you talked about real?" "The internet debunked it. They said it doesn't exist." Jiang's grip on the wheel tightened as he scoffed. "So what do you think happened back there? You think it was all an illusion?" The companion fell silent, trembling as they recalled the horrific scenes in the private room. Then, in a voice tinged with desperation, Jiang Qi asked, "Is there any medicine for this rabid flu?" Jiang's tone grew darker, more somber. "This disaster isn't something you can just cure. It's going to spread, and things will only get worse. We're already living in the end times." Jiang Qi gasped, struggling to comprehend. "Jiang, what do you mean?" Before Jiang could answer, a scream cut through the night, echoing from the street. "Hey! What are you doing?" A woman's voice shrieked in terror. "Rabid flu! It's the rabid flu!" Everyone in the car turned in time to witness a gruesome scene. Another infected person was attacking a girl on the street, the brutal violence sending chills down their spines. Despite the chaos, Jiang remained unerringly calm. His voice dropped to a near whisper as if he were speaking to himself. "What we're seeing now is just the start. It's a localized outbreak. Most people are still in the incubation phase, but soon, it'll spiral out of control." His eyes flicked briefly to the others in the car. "If you want to survive, from now on, you'll follow my orders. Understand?" In unison, they all nodded. "Yes, Brother Yong," they responded, their voices filled with a mix of fear and trust. As the car tore through the streets, leaving the horrors behind, Jiang couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. His mission, for now, was complete. He thought to himself, "It's done. Time to see what's next." Pulling up a screen visible only to him, Jiang scanned the options. There it was, the post-apocalyptic cultivator box, still available. "I'll have to get it, or maybe refresh manually," he mused, knowing that every choice would determine his next steps in this new, chaotic world. The atmosphere in the car grew heavier, but in Jiang's mind, everything was falling into place. Soon, he thought, we'll be at the fortress. And then, we'll see what happens next. As Jiang drove through the streets, his mind churned with a storm of thoughts, but one nagging concern wouldn't let go. Trust, that's the real problem now. His fingers clenched around the steering wheel, knuckles white as his gaze hardened. To think we treated him as a brother. The world around them was falling into chaos, and Jiang knew that survival wasn't just about fighting off the infected, it was about knowing who could stand by your side when everything crumbled. Trust, loyalty, these were the only things left that truly mattered. But trust had been shattered before, and the bitter sting of betrayal never left. Jiang Qi sat beside him, oblivious to the dark thoughts swirling in Jiang's mind. But he had his own demons. His heart still ached from memories of his previous life when his entire dorm had been slaughtered by zombies, a massacre brought on by the treachery of one of their own. The horrifying scene replayed in his mind constantly, his brother's screams echoing through the halls, their blood staining the walls. And through it all, one question burned in his soul: who betrayed us? Who was it that got everyone killed? The weight of the past hung heavy in the car, both men locked in their own haunted memories, even as the present world continued to unravel around them. Meanwhile, across town in a modest apartment, a young woman's voice trembled with anxiety as she spoke on the phone. "Honey, how are things on your end? When will the supplies you mentioned be delivered? It's so chaotic outside, I'm scared to even go to the supermarket." Her voice wavered as the unrest outside grew closer to home. Her boyfriend's voice came through the line, steady and reassuring. "Soon, baby. I'll send them over as soon as I'm done with what I'm doing." Just as she started to relax, a sharp knock at the door startled her. The phone slipped from her grasp, clattering onto the floor. "Oh," she gasped, her heart leaping in her chest. On the other end of the line, her boyfriend's voice tensed with concern. What's wrong, baby? There's someone at the door, she replied, quickly ending the call. As she made her way to the door, she hesitated for a moment before peering through the peephole. Relief washed over her as she recognized her neighbor, Jeez, standing impatiently outside. Opening the door, she let out a sigh. Jeez, you scared me to death. Why do you always knock so hard? Jeez waved her off, stepping inside with a grim expression. Old Lou on the first floor was taken away this morning. The girl blinked in confusion. Taken away? What do you mean? The police and an ambulance came for him. Took him together, Jeez whispered, her tone dropping conspiratorially. The girl's frown deepened as realization dawned. So that's why it was so chaotic downstairs this morning, she muttered to herself, connecting the dots. Jeez nodded, her face dark with seriousness. Looks like that rabbit flu isn't just a scare after all. Her eyes flicked toward the girl. Has Li Shuxiong delivered the supplies he promised you yet? The girl shook her head, her frustration growing. Not yet, Jeez huffed in frustration, throwing her hands up. I told you already, no man is any good. Listen to me, call him right now and tell him this Zhang Xiaoyong has a massive stockpile of supplies. He could make a fortune during the pandemic. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. What? How do you know? A sly grin crept onto Jeez's face. Last time I was kicked out of Zhang Xiaoyong's place, I had one of my lackeys keep an eye on him. We found out that every few days, there's a truck delivering supplies to that abandoned factory of his. The girl gasped, realization hitting her like a freight train. He knew. He must have known about the pandemic in advance. Jeez leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a low whisper full of urgency. Exactly. Call your boyfriend and make him seal the deal as soon as possible. If he makes money off this, we'll get a bigger cut. The girl hesitated, her mind racing with the possibilities and the dangers that lay ahead. Trust was a fragile thing, and in a world falling apart, it could easily be shattered. But survival was a game they couldn't afford to lose. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Have a nice day.